All right. I think everything is loaded and up and running. So let me switch over to our jam stream layout and we'll go ahead and get started. Alrighty then. Let me just take a look at where everything in the audio is outputting. I know it's only been a couple weeks, but it seems like it's been a little while since we did one of these. Let's see. I think it's mostly just the EQ I need to be careful of. I'm going to put dynamics about there. EQ's about there should be good for speaking. My speaking might be a little bit soft, but I don't want the boost to be too high on the mic. Otherwise, when I do my actual snares, I don't want it to redline. So let me do a couple quick snare checks. See where the readout's falling. Bruh button's working. All right, if I'm not eating the microphone, let's see, PF snare. All right, as long as I don't point directly at the mic, that one should be all right. Outward K. Okay, I gotta be careful with that one. That one hits a little bit harder. BGM's the other one that usually tends to redline if I'm not careful. Okay, I need to be careful where I point that one to. I think so. I have my mic kind of over me. It's oriented kind of like it is here on the layout, just a little bit higher up. That should be fine. It's what we used previously. I just got to lean in a little bit when I'm talking because it's a little bit softer. But for the actual beats, I think if I go alongside it like normal, perpendicular, then we should be okay. I could try adding a little bit of reverb to the mix as well. I'll just make it a little bit subtle so it doesn't sound like I'm echoing in a cathedral. We'll turn it down to about 20%. Leave it there. But I think that should be good. So let me do a breakdown of what I want to cover on today's jam stream. So like the stream title would suggest, there's a couple things I want to focus on. I want to run through some practice and some sound theory stuff that I've been working on since the last time we did one of these. There'll be a couple things I wanted to hit on today. Nothing too in-depth or major unless people have questions. And from there, I want to move on to an experiment with some sampling. We've done that maybe once or twice here on stream, but today seems to coincide pretty well with the VTuber challenge that the Prince just posted the other day. And so I want to experiment around with doing some sampling with the loop and doing some mixing on the version that he uploaded. And that could be an interesting experiment to see how we can tweak things and sort of put some twists on the beat that he posted. And I think that could be interesting since it's going to directly influence the project that I'm working on in response to the Prince's challenge. We'll tackle that second. And then third, we'll get back to BGM brainstorming and start with some fresh tracks with some ideas from you guys in chat. Abby says, yo, hey, what's up, Abby? Welcome to the jam stream. We are just getting started. getting set up here. I'm about to run through some warm-up stuff, and then we'll sort of segue into the sound theory and discussion, and then sort of proceed from there. So this might be the first one of these jam streams that you've jumped on since you came on board here. So to sort of explain my setup, what I've got here in my workspace is a device called the RC505. If you know anything about instruments or even beatboxing, the RC505 is what's called a loop station. And just to demonstrate what it does, in case you've never seen one, it allows me to capture audio into different tracks. There's 5 in total, and it allows me to loop them. And you can do a lot of really interesting things with music construction and whatnot using the loop. I primarily use it as a sound source for when I'm doing these jam streams, because it allows me to edit things like mix settings and volume and all sorts of other stuff. But it's also the device I use to create the BGM tracks. So if I were to just input some sort of audio and then capture it and play it back, input some sort of audio and then capture it and play it back, input some sort of audio and then capture it and play it back, input some sort of audio and then capture it and play it back, input some sort of as you can hear it just and play it back in looping. And I drop the fader down just so it doesn't overpower me when I'm talking, and capture it and play it. But we'll see a little bit more about how the loop station works a little bit. But to start, I need to get warmed up, since we're going to do beatbox practice and sound theory. My face and my mouth muscles need to be actively warmed up so I can get my sounds to come out. So this is kind of the intro, as you can see for the stream caption. Intro warm-up. This is also a good chance for me to tweak sound settings. So for you guys watching in the chat, if I need to fix anything with the sound, if something is too loud and it's blowing out your headphones, or it's too soft and you can't hear what I'm doing, just let me know and I can tweak settings on the fly. So that said, I'm going to run through some practice patterns and we will go ahead and get started. To kick things off, this is sort of my sound check button as well. It's the bruh button that I have tied to one track on the loop here. That's usually my check to make sure things aren't peaking anywhere. But we'll go ahead and get started. Start off simple. And again, let me know if anything needs to be tweaked with the audio. Hey, Edward's here. Edward echoes the bruh button. Bruh. Is the sound coming in okay, Edward? I was tweaking things since we loaded up here, I'm using mostly the same settings. I did add a reverb. It might be kind of hard to hear because I have it set kind of low on the track. But let me know if I need to tweak anything. Okay, Edward says, yep. Sounds all right so far. Okay, let's keep going with warm-up. One thing I haven't been doing on these, which I probably should since it would make my explanations a little bit easier to follow, I don't normally do technicality warm-ups, and I think that's not as big a deal, with the exception of the one that I've been drilling a lot, the TKKs, because I can't seem to just do it cold yet. So I'm going to do a couple quote-unquote speed pattern drills as a warm-up for doing like the TKKs that we've been practicing for the last several months. And I'm going to see if it allows me to explain some of the chains and combos that I've been working with a little bit better, because when I try and do it cold, it's not as clean. And I think it's just mostly tongue muscle memory and mouth muscle memory. So let me do a little bit of technicality warm-ups, and to sort of lead into sound theory as we're getting through warm-ups, for the folks that may be watching this for the first time or maybe checking it out later, the TKK sound in technicality and beatboxing is what's used for combos of different sound sets or patterns. The whole concept of technicality is stringing together specific sounds in chains, and it's not necessarily speed, it's just combinations that can be used for speed, and you slot them in and around your beats to give them more variety, kind of like a drum fill. So to illustrate what that sounds like, the TKK uses a T hat, and I know I explain this almost every time, but I know we got some newer folks lately, so if they check this out later, this is a bit of background for them. So TKK in notation is T, capital T, small K, big K. In fact, let me put that in the notation here. This will probably be at least good for people to see. Because I did want to talk about this a little bit for the sound theory discussion anyway. And this might be the first time I've done it on stream. Edward can tell me if I've explained this with a visual before. But the TKK looks like this. Capital T, small K, large K. And the large K is the rim shot. And one of the OGs in the beatbox community, a dude named Skiller, I know he's from Europe. He might be Bulgarian? I don't remember, but he's an OG and very, very well known. I started following his YouTube channel because he's been putting up tutorials and some interesting discussion pieces. He suggested changing the big K, I think it was, to capital C. But for the sake of consistency, in case we actually get other beatboxers here, they'll know what I'm talking about when I say TKKs. And Edward says, I think you did that one time. Okay, all right, good. We'll keep it in the breakdown here so you guys can at least see the pattern I'm talking about. And then we'll see if I need to add anything else. But so the TKK uses the hat sound, which is the capital T, the just letter T without any vocalization. So just the K, little K in TKK can be inwards or outwards. I do mine outwards, and it's just a like the letter K without the vocalization. So you have a and then the big K in the TKK pattern is the rim shot, which sounds like basically a rim shot is an inwards K or a without breathing in. And breaking down the mechanics of doing the rim shot is complicated because it took me forever to learn the sound, but a real quick high-level explanation is just it's a non-breath snare sound and lends itself well to technicality because there's no breath, and it's all just mouth pressure and muscle control, and lets you do the relatively quickly. So the TKK chain is, and I guess based on what we've talked about before, the TKK combo is one of the most elementary and technicality patterns that people learn. Wasn't the first one I learned. In fact, that's why I'm learning it now. But in order to gain proficiency with TKKs is just a matter of practice, muscle memory, and just consistency to go from just like a chord note, and the more you practice it and the more your mouth gets familiar with the positioning, the faster you're able to go and you'll be able to chain it faster. And so let's see, let me, as an intro to the actual technicality, sound theory stuff I wanted to talk about, I'm going to work through some sort of patterns that work on just the TKK and get my mouth warmed up. That's the whole point. Because, let's see, doing it completely cold, the fastest I could do it right now, I've been practicing this a lot lately, would be, let's see, and after maybe the 20th rotation or whatever that is, then it starts to get sloppy, and then I have to actually stop and take a breath. So if we were to do a warm-up pattern, this is something I didn't really think about, but a warm-up pattern for the TKK might just be a mix of the triplet pattern plus a snare. So we might be able to do something like, and then add in more chains just to go a little bit faster and get warmed up. Abby says, how do you do that? I can only do the basics like BTK. Okay, so I know we haven't talked about it since you started hanging out, Abby, but obviously you know something about Beatbox, which is great. That's good. That's going to help a lot, in fact. So let's step back a little bit through like the TKK explanation. So for the way the pattern works, and BTK would be like a, or it would be basically kick, hat, snare, right? Like a kick, hat, and maybe an inward or outward K snare for a BTK. Which is actually, that's not a pattern I really practice. So it's probably good that you're talking about some ones that maybe people don't readily use, because the idea of technicality can apply to any combination of sounds. It just works better for some than others. So for the, and I'll try and do it slowly as we're explaining things so it makes sense. The TKK is primarily inward. And if you're the type of person who knows inwards K sounds, you could do it that way. I don't do it that way, so I can't really explain it too well. But to break down each set in the sound, like we were talking about a little while ago, it's just a hat, just a T sound, and it kind of important thing that some beatboxers explain, which I think is really good. It's not a tss, not a TS for the TKK. That's a little bit different. And it actually uses a bit more of your mouth. It's difficult to chain it into other sounds because it has this on it. Instead, you want a like a ta. That's the first in the TKK. The second one is a K sound, not really a K snare because it's not forceful enough. So just a letter K without the vocalization. So, and that's actually just a TK pattern, which in itself is really good to practice because you can use just a TK in beatbox patterns as well. You get something like, I can't do TKs fast, but if you just practice, you can actually get that into just a two note or two instrument sound, and you can get that super quick as well. But if you go back to TKKs, you have the And then the big K, which we have on the notation here, is the rim shot, and that's the most tricky sound to learn. And the rim shot, if you think of the motion, do you know how to do an inwards K snare, Abby? Because that's the easiest way to explain how to do a rim shot. It's done the same way, just slightly different technique. And the inwards K, for the other folks who don't know the sound, if you take your tongue, and this is a really tricky sound to describe. It's one of the beginner hurdles when learning beatboxing. An inwards K, if you take your tongue and seal it to the roof of your mouth and block your airflow when you're trying to breathe in through your mouth, it would be, you guys aren't going to be able to hear it, but if you completely seal the airflow with your tongue, there's no pressure that goes past your tongue, right? And that's actually a sucker punch type technique if you do it with force. But if you completely seal your tongue to the roof of your mouth and block your airflow, and then drop the back of your tongue slightly and give it a pop, that's how you get the inward K. And so Abby says, inward, yes, I can do that. Okay, so the sound for inward K is, it's taking that airflow and then dropping your tongue to pop it. And that's how you're getting the, and the timing is breathing in, getting the suction, and dropping it all at once. And the actual snare, the is what happens when you drop your tongue and release the airflow inwards. It's very tricky to explain, and a bunch of other beatboxers have dedicated tutorials on learning the inwards K. But back on topic, when we're talking about the rim shot, okay? So the rim shot is done the exact same way. It's just without breathing in like an inwards K. So the way I learned it, and again, it took me forever to learn the rim shot. I was beatboxing for a good greater part of a year before someone was able to give me something that explained the technique to me. It was driving me nuts. I could not figure out why I couldn't do a rim shot. But you use the same suction, and instead of breathing in, you're basically using your mouth pressure to drop your tongue in that same sealed position, and you're using the pressure just to pop it. So it's not going to be quite as forceful, but you're dropping your tongue and getting that pressure. And I move my jaw to the side to do an inwards K, and you do the same thing for a rim shot. So it's like a rim shot without breathing. And what it sounds like is, and I think the tutorial that sort of got to click for me was, if you get that suction, like you're in an inwards K position, instead of breathing in, you start to do a swallowing motion with your mouth, which gets your tongue to kind of move a little bit, or it puts pressure on your tongue. And then instead of just swallowing, you basically pop your tongue like you would for an inwards K, just without the breath. And then that motion creates kind of like a muscle trigger that pops it out, and you get the, and it's similar sound to the inward K, but not as forceful because it doesn't have the breath power behind it. So if you compare it, inwards K, rim shot. Notice how it's shorter, faster, and doesn't sound like it's got that punch behind it. So again, inwards K, rim shot. Very tricky. But if you can learn how to do the rim shot, then the TKK combo is the t, the k, and then those three all together. And so the practice, once you can do the third part, because the first two parts admittedly are easy. The T and the K, anyone could do that. It's not hard. But like Abby's saying, the rim shot is the tricky part in that. And I can't remember which beatboxer. One of my favorite beatboxers is a dude from the United States named Kindo, Kindo. And he has a really detailed set of tutorials for tons of sounds in beatboxing. And he starts with the basics and moves up into more advanced things. And he has one for the rim shot, I believe, and his was really good. So for learning technicality, and we could spend some time talking about this because it's one of my favorite topics. Figure out how to do the rim shot, and then once you know the rim shot, just practice it, because it's not going to be clean and snappy when you first learn it, because even mine's not super great. But once you know how to do the and just practice doing that over and over again. And then when you slot it into the pattern for the TKK, that's the triplet, right? And you can start off doing it that slow. I definitely did at the beginning, just a. And as your mouth gets familiar with the position and doesn't have to reset every time, then you can start doing it faster and faster. And that's how you get the speed that you see some of the big pros in the scene, like Alem from France, or D-Lo, or any of the big beatboxers that had those crazy speed chains. They got really good at stringing together those sounds and getting the muscle memory so they can just do TKKs in their sleep. So doing each of the components slowly, and this applies to coming up with new patterns, doing it slowly and then slowly building up speed and consistency until you're able to do it fast. And so that's how, for me, again, I'm not good at TKKs. It's one of my worst sound sets that I'm actively practicing. Going from just a and string it together faster, and this is kind of the point of the warm-up, you get the and you're able to chain that kind of quote-unquote speed pattern for longer. And I can't do it for super long. My tongue gets tired really quickly. But that's endurance. That's practice and endurance. So it's learning the mechanics, learning the positioning, and then endurance and consistency and everything going forward. But the kind of neat thing about doing technicality patterns is once you know the basic sound set, you can slot it in between things, and you can also use it to combine with other sounds to make new technicality patterns. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today. So I think one of the ones we talked about last jam stream was a multi-set mix with TKKs and things in between. So you might get something like TKK. Now I gotta think about how this one was written out. Naked Snake says, "Hi, Mr. Anime Beatbox Robot Man." Hey, Naked Snake. Welcome to the jam stream. We are talking about beatbox technique and sound theory. So let me see if I can break that pattern down, because I know it in my head, but trying to speak through it in real time is kind of difficult. So let me take a step back for the technicality pattern. So if we use a kick, TKK, kick, TKK, real simple, it would just be a. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, essentially a 4 count. If we do that slowly, that again, it would sound like. And the variations we talked about before, kind of briefly as we were experimenting around with it, would be something like changing the second set instead of just being a repeat. So I think the one we did was like a drum and bass one. So it went kick, TKK, kick, TKK, TKTKK, something like that, which sounds like. And if you're doing a drum and bass pattern, this is what I've been practicing a little bit too, it would sound like. Guess it's 2 kicks. My bad. But the neat thing about how technicality slots together is that you can switch different components of those quick sounds in and out, and it changes the way the pattern sounds and the flow. And it basically has infinite possibilities for things that you can do sound-wise. You just have to be able to come up with creative ways to combine the sounds. So the one I was trying to do would have been a kick, TKK, F, TKK, which doing it real slow would be. And then the one I was working on that I'm not great at yet alternates between the B, TKK, and F, TKK. And that would sound more like. Not clean, but kind of an interesting combination of patterns. but pretty versatile. Abby says, TKK is very difficult. Maybe I need more than 1 month to learn it. Okay, so here's what I recommend, Abby, and hopefully this will save you some time. All right, because I want you to not have any big roadblocks when you're learning. If you want to learn TKK, the first thing to do is track down a tutorial for the rim shot, because the rim shot is the hardest part of the TKK, and everybody's mouth physiology is a little bit different in how they learn. So my recommendation is to just search on YouTube, search Beatbox rim shot tutorial, and you'll probably get like 10 of them from the big names. I think Kindo, Tyler W, maybe Rubik, maybe Nemesis from one of his old videos. A whole bunch of people in the scene over the last like 8 years have made tutorials on doing that rim shot sound because it's tricky. To watch them all. Like, watch each one and listen to different people explain how to do the technique differently. And then just experiment around until you get the sound. Because for TKK patterns, again, that's the toughest part, right? Once you do that, then you could start practicing the TKK pattern because you'll know it. Now, if you can already do inwards K, you can do technicality with inwards K. It's just harder to do quick because you have to breathe. And for Naked Snake, who I don't know if you've been on our jam streams before, but I'm gonna assume you're not a beatboxer. Please correct me if I'm assuming wrong. I don't know you super well, but for beatbox sound theory and whatnot, what they call an inward K snare, and it was one of the sound set snares, and that sounds like it's done by breathing in and basically using your mouth pressure to create a seal with your tongue and then popping the back of your tongue down to get the sound to come out. We were talking about it a little bit a while ago. But to Abby's point, you can do the TKK, or not TKK, you can do technicality with the inwards K. It's just difficult to do quickly. So if you went, you could do that, but you can't really chain it because you have to reset your mouth to do the inwards K because it breathes. That's why people use a rim shot in place of that one. But you can use the inwards K to cap off a series of sounds in a technicality pattern as well. It's just a little bit tricky. But for the sake of the sound theory discussion today, I want to talk a little bit about other forms of technicality and stuff that I've been experimenting with. And maybe for Abby, since we were talking about it, it'll give you some additional ideas or options to experiment around with technicality instead of, just the straight TKKs, because that's not the only combination of sounds. There's millions of combinations of sounds for technicality patterns. And again, to explain for folks that are jumping on in between the discussion here, in beatboxing, technicality means sound combinations that are strung together. It doesn't specifically mean speed patterns. A lot of technicality is speed patterns, but it's just combinations of sounds, like micro sounds, put into combo chains. Think of it like combos. And so the TKK one we were talking about earlier is the one that sounds like, and it's strung together. But the one that I learned first, and we've talked about this on previous Beatbox Jam streams, is actually the TKP. So let me add that to the caption here. But we'll take the intro warm-up off since we're not really doing that. The first one that I learned, just sort of as I was learning basics for beatbox sounds, is the TKP. And it's very similar to the TKK, but in my opinion, it's easier to do because it doesn't require a rim shot, which is a kind of more difficult sound to learn. So the TKP sounds just in breakdown is a T hi-hat sound. Anyone can do that sound. I guarantee it. If you can't, then let me know. And I'll personally try and help you. But literally just the T sound without the E. So K sound, same as the TKK, or the little K here. is a k sound, K, without the just a k. And the P sound, exactly what it sounds like. Letter P without the E. Just a p. Let me make sure I'm not doing that directly into the mic, otherwise it's gonna sound really loud to you guys. But 3 sounds. A t, k, p. The P sound kind of sounds like a kick. You could do either a B or a P really for the patterns. It functions the same way. But t, k, p, t, k, p, t, k, p. My kicks sound more like b. They're a bit more punchy, so for me, maybe it's more like a B. I write it as TKP, it's fine. So those 3 sounds are all that pattern is. And it's just putting them together quickly. You start with quarter notes, you move up to 8th notes, move up to 16th notes, and you just do faster and faster. And like any other technicality pattern, it's just practicing consistency and speed. Because again, the sounds themselves are not hard. But if you want to be able to do them as speed patterns, just like with the TKK, that's where it takes a little bit of practice. And it's a triplet pattern, so obviously it's got to fit a rhythm as a triplet. But if you take the and get in the practice of just doing it back to back, again, it's very repetitive, but everything else in Beatbox is as well. And in practice, you learn how to get faster with it. So for me, when I was just starting out, I'd usually string it in between beats. So it might be something like, and you hear that, how it's slotting in between the sections of the measure, kind of like a drum fill. And practicing the TKP over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, eventually it starts going from and you start chaining it faster, more of them back to back. And so the fastest I could do TKPs now would be probably it sounds like a roll, because it essentially is. You're chaining those 3 sounds so rapidly and back to back repetitively that it ceases to be a triplet pattern and becomes more like a roll, which is pretty fun to use in the beat, admittedly. So if we take our original one that I was doing and sort of tweak it slightly, using that roll and how I would employ it in a beat, you might use it more like a break in the rhythm. So let's see if we're going. Something like that, and then you're sticking that roll in there for an entire section of the beat just to give it some variety. So I encourage any of you guys that are curious about beatboxing, just practice those 3 sounds, and it may take a while. I'm not saying you're gonna get it in a day for that speed, but if you practice just the and again, start slow. Just do it over and over and over again. Maybe when you're making lunch or checking your mail or something, just practice that over and over again. After a while, your mouth will get the muscle memory and you'll start doing it faster. And then the more you work at it, the faster you go. And I'm really curious to see in the future, if I keep working on it for another year, how fast I'm able to do it. So Abby says, roll is impossible for me. You're not going to be able to do that super fast chain of the 3 sounds immediately. It took me probably almost a year of practicing it to get that. Not practicing it constantly, but if you drill it for just, let's say, a cumulative hour, I'm not saying a straight hour, but an hour's worth of time every day, and just practice your muscle position of just TKP, try it for a week and take note of how fast you can do the at the beginning of the week, and after practicing it for a week, check it again at the end of the week, and be willing to bet money you'll see a difference in how fast you can do it. And the more you practice it, the more consistent and clean it gets. And it even helps to put it in a beat. It doesn't have to be complicated. Like the one that I did before, where it's just a triplet in between sound sets, where you're getting them. And you're just slotting it in there, and your mouth gets used to working the sound in. That helps with practice as well. So, like anything else in beatbox, it's a grind. But you do that, and you'll see improvement over time. It's not going to be in a day. It might not even be in 3 days. But you will see it change if you practice it and just drill it. Just like any other sound, be it a bass, be it a synth, be it a lip roll or anything. Just it's practice all the time. And for technicality, exact same thing. So the TKP, again, that was the one I learned first, just sort of unintentionally. That was the first one that I kind of learned how to put into beats. The variation on that one, which I like and is a little bit easier to do that kind of roll with, flips the instruments around a little bit. So it's the same chain, but it's KPT. It's not completely backwards. It's putting the K first, putting the P second, and the hat last. And to switch it up, I usually do a KO or a ko. So it's ko-PT. Same triplet sound, but instead of a tick, it sounds like. Again, very simple, very similar. But if we think about the roll, when you combine just the spam chain and the whole thing, the TKP one sounds like. And the ko-PT sounds similar, but that sounds like. And one thing I was experimenting with is changing between like a regular K and a ko in between the chains. So like alternating every other one, which is kind of difficult to do in the beginning, but it would sound like. And you're going kind of back and forth really rapidly. But same theory, right? You start slow with the. Practice that over and over again until it gets familiar, and then you start working your way up with speed and muscle memory, and it goes from. And then eventually you're able to do the roll. Again, not done in a day. I'll be real with you guys. It does take just practice to get consistency and muscle memory. But if you do, then eventually it gets easier and becomes more versatile to use in sound sets, which is kind of the interesting thing about technicality. Again, it's kind of an infinite potential creativity tool in beatboxing, which is why it's so interesting. But if we were to break it down a little bit further for applying these instrument sound sets and things like the TKPs or KPTs or both, you guys may have heard in some of the beats that I've done where I will kind of combine quote unquote technical sounds with other ones. And this alludes to what Abby was saying earlier with things like an inwards K or any other K snare. And that's just experimenting around with either a set or breaking the set into pieces and then putting other sounds around it, which is what makes technicality so versatile. So what do I mean by that? So let's see. If I were to think about an outwards K sound set, I didn't really prepare this in advance, but if we're going to do something like, okay, that would work. We're going from like a mix of hats and kicks, and then is an outward. My outwards K sounds like. I'm gotta be careful on the mic. So if we're going. And we wanted to use technicality to serve as a fill, like a drum fill on a drum set, in between parts of the pattern. That's how you're getting the section added, where it will be something like. And that's just a TKP outwards K snare. And so you're basically taking that triplet pattern, slotting it in where it fits in the beat, and capping it off with whatever you're putting in the measure. In this case, it was an outwards K. And that's kind of an example of how you can really mix up the variety and apply the idea of technicality in a whole bunch of different situations. For me, it's trying to learn as many as possible and learn variation while practicing, consistency and getting the sounds to be clean. That's the trickiest part. But to sort of round off the discussion on technicality, we'll check back in with my status on the TKKs. Again, it's a work in progress for me. I feel like it's getting easier to do, and now it's just a matter of building up endurance to be able to do that roll in the chain longer. But what I've also been trying to focus on is using that same idea of slotting things into a beat to apply to the TKK, because again, I could do the TKP or KPT in my sleep. But for me, adapting the TKK, because it's not as familiar to me, is the challenge. So you might do something like a drum and bass beat. For me, for whatever reason, is the easiest way for me to practice TKKs. I think it's just my brain defaults to speed for drum and bass, and it's easier for me to stick that in there. So if we were to think about a drum and bass beat and just do something for practice, you might have something like that, and then taking the TKKs and slotting it in to vary up the rhythm. You might get something like and then for me, that's kind of how I practice it, just whenever I'm trying to work on the muscle memory of not just doing TKKs alone, but by slotting them into a rhythm and learning how to move between other things, because mouth position directly drives how easy it is to chain those sounds, because your mouth is moving from one set position to another. So for that drum and bass pattern, the snare is a PF snare. That's a completely different mouth position than the TKK because it's using your lips. So learning how to go from a to a is really important, because it's a jump. And when you first are trying to do it, it's going to be really foreign and unfamiliar. But the more you get familiar with resetting to the position, and that's where the muscle memory comes in, that's where it is good practice. And you learn how to basically reset to where you need to do sounds in different positions. Abby says, that's a B outward. Are you talking about the drum and bass pattern I did? So for the, yeah, that's all outward. None of it's inwards. You can't do a PF snare inwards as far as I know, but everything for just the, yep, 100% outward. Outward kick, hat, PF snare. And so to kind of illustrate my point, if you go the last PF snare, that's what needs to chain into the, and it's different because you're using your lips for the PF snare. The it's all inwards, or in your mouth, excuse me. It's all in your mouth, but it's using your tongue. So you're having to go from a, which doesn't use your tongue at all. It's all lips and mouth pressure outwards for the PF into a, which is inwards. Again, in your mouth. It's either totally inwards or 2/3 inwards, depending on how you do your Ks in the TKK. So if you break it down slowly, you're going, okay, Abby says I can do the pattern, but without the TKK. All right, so try this for practice. We're talking about alternatives to just the standard, quote-unquote, known pattern of technicality or TKKs. Try it with a TKP. So same pattern. Let me do it fast, and then I'll break it down slower. So you're using TKP instead of TKK drum and bass pattern. So that would be something like, little bit more of a weird stop and reset, but if you do it quickly enough, you can kind of chain it smoothly. So if you're breaking down slowly, it would be TKP, and then you repeat the drum and bass rhythm. Same concept. It'd be really good. It's good practice because again, the is also in your mouth. It doesn't use your lips at all except for the P. So you're having to force your mouth muscles to learn how to reset from a at the end of the drum and bass rhythm to the in between. Same thing, just not quite the same mouth position as a TKK, but it's teaching you to do the same thing. How to do the jump from the to the then it doesn't sound that difficult because again, it's just your mouth, but it's a different position and it's a different set position for a different set of sounds. So you do it slow, just and then after you learn how to do the TKP faster and faster, then you can speed up the rhythm. Don't try and go balls out super fast in the beginning because it's going to be really difficult to get the mouth muscle memory. You could try and brute force it that way, but I would start slow, learn how to do it slow, and then the speed will come over time as you work at it. So that's a kind of a real world, quote unquote, real world example about how to take technicality, slot it into things for practice purposes, and give you something that'll, one, open up more tools in beatboxing and also give you more ways to adapt, right? If you learn how to do technicality in a vacuum, that's all well and good, but you're never going to be doing technicality by itself if you're beatboxing. Like, you may have a section that's nothing but technicality, but you're not going to go up in a battle with someone on stage with a routine and start off and just be like, okay, it's my turn, I'm going to go. And that's your round. No, you're going to fit it into a greater routine and pattern and construct it that way. In order to do that, you need to know how to put things together and jump between different sound sets and different positions in order to do that easily. So that's why experimenting around with beats and whatnot and just seeing what you can slot in where and how it works is part of the fun and creativity in beatboxing that I like, but also it just gives you more tools in the tool set. All right. I think that will do it for... Oh, there is something else for technicality, technically, that I wanted to talk about since it's something new. For the folks that are watching in chat, as usual, feel free to stop me, or if you have any questions or any thoughts on the stuff we cover. It's not static lesson. Feel free to jump in with anything. But I've been working on a new sound set. I think it's considered technicality. I'd have to ask a pro. But it's using TSF. And as far as I know, it's considered technicality because it's sound combos. But if you think of hats, this is a hat combo, essentially. The hat combo is TS. F. I should have written this one down beforehand, too. But if we think about it in practice, then maybe I can sort of reverse engineer what the notation would be. Apologies, I didn't prepare this in advance, but I knew I wanted to talk about it. So I think of it like a kind of complicated hat run. And so it would sound like... So that's TS, a and a F together. And kind of like a TK or TK chain where it's just... This is a TSF chain. And it doesn't sound like much on its own, but I can illustrate with a beat and then I'll kind of break it down a little bit to the best of my ability. What I've experimenting around with was using that as a series of runs in between and then trying to figure out how to chain parts of the rhythm with this TSF. So let me I'll add it to the description here. That way people jumping in can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to write it like this. I don't know if there's official notation for this, but I've seen people do similar sounds, so I know it exists somewhere. But if, let's see, the beat that I was using to practice this would be kind of an off rhythm beat, a little bit different from like the drum and bass one we were just doing. So let me run through the beat, show how I'm putting it together, and then we'll break it down, and I'll kind of explain what my theory is on this. So it'd be something like, and so thinking about what I'm using, this TSF sound, it's slotting in kind of like a hat run, like a hat run ish, in between, but it's using the TSF back to back, and that's how you're getting that. But what I've noticed is kind of interesting about it is you can stagger that sound and mix up other individual sounds in between to change the pattern. And that's how you're getting the, and you can repeat it faster. That's a triplet TSF. Technically, it's like a TSF K. Sort of. It's like a really light K. It's more like a, more of a K sound. Not a hard K snare, just a K sound. And so it's kind of interesting because it's more airy. It sounds, again, more like a hi-hat run. And I want to explore the idea a little bit more because I think there's a lot of potential there. So again, if you're thinking about the rhythm that I did, where we're doing, and let me see if I can break down the triplet. TSFT. That's what the combo is there. That's where it becomes a little bit more variable in how you can change it up, but it functions on the same logic as the rest of Technicality. It's just different. And I've heard people experiment around with this. I didn't invent this sound set, but I don't hear it super commonly, so I want to kind of work at it some more. Edward says, would the F be capital in that sound? I'm capitalizing the F just because it's different. It's different in the sound set than the TS. So depending on how you want to put your notation together, usually you can put things in capitals to denote a different sound. And not always, because like in the TKK, the T and the K and the big K are all three sounds. But to differentiate the difference in the Ks in the notation, you capitalize one to show it's a rim shot. So for the TSF, it's not three sounds. It's two sounds. The TS is one sound. So that's the tss, and then the F is just a f. To me, again, I'm just writing it this way because that's the way I kind of memorized it. But if you wrote it as a small f in a chain, you could do that. People kind of universally, I think, identify the F as like a f or a FT sound. For purposes here in trying to break out the Technicality chain, I think it's fine to leave the F as a capital. Because if you could do lowercase, it doesn't matter because it's only two sounds. But if you're doing three sounds and you're doing like TSFFT, which would be like then it might make sense to lowercase the F so it doesn't get confused with the FT. Because the F, big F, lowercase t is it's a FT hat, they call it. Versus the big F in here is just a f. There's no hit at the end of it. It's just a f sound. That's how you're getting that. So you could do TSFFT, which would be, that's actually really hard to do. You're doing two F sounds, an F, and then a F. And it's kind of difficult to make it sound like there's a break because it's the same. It comes from the same place in your mouth. But to answer your question, in the 2-chain with just TS and F, I would keep the F capitalized. If I was putting it into more than 2, I would probably lowercase it if there was another F sound somewhere in there. I don't think there's a universal rule on how you do that in beatbox notation. It's mostly just easier to read so you can distinguish between sounds. So for the sake of the exercise, it's the, I think it's fine to leave the F as a capital. If this ever gets enough attention to be seen by other beatboxers, I'd be curious to see how they would write it. But to kind of explain how I've been adapting the TSF into the sound set, again, like the spam chain for that one would be, but you can triple it by basically breaking up the F. It's not the TS that you're breaking up. And that's how you're getting the, technically it's a TSFTS or TSFT. I didn't really think about that. But you use it that way in the sound. That's how you're getting them. That triplet is kind of the speed part of that pattern. And you just alternate the regular TSF with like a TSFT or something to get a triplet instead of a double. Because the double is just the, and then with the triplet, that's how you're getting the. But again, it's just a different variation on the same idea of sounds. And I really like it, so I want to work on it some more. And maybe when we get to the BGM brainstorming part of today, we can try and work in that TS and F sound because it's different hat combination. You might be able to do something. We can test it here, in fact. Might be do something like, and maybe add a triplet in there somewhere, like a. That's tough. Maybe we went do a straight line. Let me see. I'm gonna try and loop it right here. I'll see if I can do one at the end. No, that's not gonna work. All right, not a super clean example, but even if we were to take out the little muddied up triple at the end and just did straight 2-note variations on the hat, you would get. And you guys should be able to hear that. I don't know what that equates to on a drum set. It's kind of like using a brush, like a metal brush on a hi-hat a little bit. I guess it'd be like an open hat hit in a brush, something similar, right? But it's a different sound set, and I think we could probably do a lot with that in a beat. So like, I guess we can sort of segue into using the loop station a bit more, since there wasn't a whole lot else in sound theory I wanted to talk about. But like, let's say we took our beat. I'm gonna do it on separate tracks here for the sake of experimenting. So our beat would be. Let's do it like that. I like that better. So let me get that recorded. Do it on time. Okay, it's not not perfect. It doesn't need to be for the sake of the exercise. It needs to be close for illustration purposes. But if we're to combine this with the we could see how that pairs with, you know, an underlying beat. So let's see. I'm trying to think if I want to do a stagger or just a run. It might be easier to illustrate just by doing a run. Okay, it doesn't have a clean loop. The tail is a little bit off. There's a bit of a break on the hats. But you can kind of see what I'm talking about as far as being able to use that to change up, because if we were to do just a straight hat run, just a it would sound different than if we're doing them. Almost sounds like a shaker now that I think about it, like a but slightly different sound. Either way, pretty useful for slotting in, and I think there'd be a lot of potential there. So I'm going to continue to work on this TSF and see how we can adapt it and work it into different beats and loops and whatnot. So I did want to talk about that because it's new. But let's segue into the loop-specific portion of the jam stream today. So this is going to be loop station / sampling. And before we do this, I'm going to go refill my water bottle. So let me see. I'm going to put this on in the background. I'm just going to turn my mic input all the way off to mute. I'm going to go run and grab some water, and then we'll jump into some sampling. This will be something a little bit new for the stream. So give me 1 second, and I will be back. All right. Let's turn that off. Okay, let's move on. So for this particular section, I wanted to experiment around with doing some sample captures using the loop because I'm going to be doing some work on an upcoming project. And this will be a bit of a sneak peek for you guys that are tuning into the stream. So recently on Twitter, I believe it was yesterday, in fact, Prince Lemon, friend of the channel, who's still on break, I believe. I don't think he started streaming on Twitch yet. But he posted the latest entry in his VTuber music challenge, which if you've seen the content on my channel, I've done a couple entries for that, these fun little things where he puts out a beat, a beatbox beat, and he challenges people to do something with it. For me, I've done some rap stuff with it, doing some lyrics using like a remix version of his beat. Well, he did that again. He put out a beat. But what I want to do is experiment around with sampling and doing some edits to his beat specifically. So I'm gonna actually play his clip, and I might have to disable my boost settings here so it doesn't completely screw everything up. But you guys won't be able to see the video I'm playing. Give me 1 second to make sure all the settings are correct, and then I'll play the song in its entirety. I have it downloaded. And then what I want to do is capture the complete song, and we have done this before on stream with a different song. I'm going to sample the whole thing using the loop, and then I want to start editing and mixing some things because I want to change it a little bit for the actual challenge. So I'm going to real quickly check my video player settings just to make sure the audio is coming in through everything you guys can hear. We'll play it, and then we'll work on sampling. So let me test this real quick.
All right. You know what it is? VTuber challenge number 3. This time we got an EDM style beat, so do what you do best and juice it up.
Sorry, I was muted. I have it playing through my desktop speakers or my desktop sound output, but my loop actually captures everything that comes in. So I'm going to play it through the loop. Let me know if you guys can't hear it when I play it back here. And we'll run through the whole thing from the beginning.
All right. You know what it is? VTuber challenge number 3. This time we got an EDM style beat, so do what you do best and juice it up.
Alright, I'm gonna drop the volume down a little bit. Okay, so that's the song itself. And the reason why it's coming in a little bit loud, Edward, is because all of my mic boost settings are applying to the sound coming in. It's not just my mic, it's any sound that comes into the loop station, be it from my computer or from my input on the mic itself. It's getting boosted. So what I need to do for the sample, I probably need to turn that off so that it's not recording at a super high volume, or turn them down. I don't need reverb. Actually, I shouldn't have closed VLC. Hold on.
All right.
I'll get that queued up. So I won't need reverb. What I'm going to do now is try and capture just the song itself. I don't need his intro. I'm going to start the loop capture right after he does his intro, and then I just want the song for the whole thing. So in fact, I need to be careful not to say anything at the beginning. So let's see. Turn reverb off. I will leave the other settings on there and just drop the volume a little bit, because once I record it, I can use the fader to drop the main volume so that the playback on the recorded sample is not too loud. That's not going to be a problem. So I'm going to play it again, and I'm not going to say anything because I'm going to capture the whole thing. It's like a minute. So let's see if we can get that first. So I'm going to play it, capture the loop, and then play it back to make sure we got that, because that's what we're going to edit. So let me get the sample.
Alright, you know what it is? VTuber challenge number 3. This time we got an EDM style beat, so do what you do best and juice it up. Ooh, 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 pnt, 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 pnt.
Okay, let me play it back and make sure that sample captured. And I can mess with the fader here to make sure it's not super loud. All right, sounding good so far. This is one captured loop track on the loop station. I'm just messing around with track effects. Sorry, I'll let the sample play. And then it repeats. Okay, so I think that captured fine. Let me readjust my volume here. I think that captured fine. For the sake of the exercise here today, I just want to mess around with doing some edits and some mixing to the actual original sample. It's not going to be anything final for the actual project itself. It's more of an experiment thing today. So let me save this. So for the actual challenge itself, I like his beat. It's a little bit different from the other ones. Still follows a pretty good flow. It sounds like he's doing BGM snares. I know the Prince said it's not his strongest sound, So it's good to see him practicing other types of instruments. But for the sake of creating verses and doing the actual response to the challenge, it's a little bit slow for me. Maybe it's kind of a personal problem, but I have a really tough time doing rap lyrics over slow beats. Probably because I'm used to a faster cadence when it comes to structuring bars and structuring different parts of the verses. So for the remix, I'm going to speed it up. And what I wanted to fiddle around with today was getting kind of a baseline of the BPM on his sample and then adjusting the BPM to be kind of in line with where I would actually write verses and correspond all the different bars. So if we look at the tempo, according to the master tempo set for the loop is 103 beats per minute. So if we play his sample, I'm going to try and crank it up. Maybe let's try increments. So I'm going to play it. Let's go up to 125. Okay, that's a little bit better. I wonder how much we can push it. I wonder if I can go up to 145. This is 140. 141 technically. Okay. Now it's gonna loop. 140 might be a little bit too fast. If we drop it down to 135 or 130. Okay, that's not a bad adjustment to the speed. So if we leave it at 131 BPM, that might be a good tempo. One thing that I'm going to need to do, and kind of the reason why I'm experimenting with this here, is because I'm going to have to extend this thing. And I'll need to mess around with the best way to do that. Probably the way I'll end up doing it, because I have kind of a caveman approach to doing audio mixing because I'm not a sound engineer. I'll probably take this sample and record the whole thing using my audio recording software and then break up different parts and extend it out that way. And then I should be able to kind of adjust some things with the mixing. We'll see. It's probably not going to sound clean, but given this is just a recording off of Twitter, it's not like a high fidelity studio recording, that's fine. It doesn't need to be super fancy for the sake of the challenge. But I noticed whenever the Prince writes his challenges, probably just because it's the way he does his beats, he doesn't do it around like a verse structure. So I usually write 16 bars for his challenges. This thing is shorter than 16 bars. From the minute the beat starts, the end, I want to say is like 12. Or it could be an uneven number as well. It could be even like 11 or something. But it's not long enough for a full 16. So now that I have sort of an idea on the tempo, I'm going to have to cut it up and then actually extend it out into a longer track. Oh, Penguin's here. Penguin says, "Hi, Raku. I'm at work and came to say hi. Also, my day has been hectic so far." Ah, I see. You're getting that weekend grocery store rush as people scramble to get stuff for Thanksgiving next week. Well, hopefully it's not too crazy for the rest of your shift, man. I know how those weekend rushes go, so hang in there. All right. So anyway, what I was saying about the breakdown of how I'm gonna have to edit and mix this. What you guys have heard here with the sped up sample is just kind of a placeholder. I'm gonna have to probably record it and then start working on cutting it up and then structuring it around the actual bars and verses. Edward says with the clutch, "Hi at work, I'm dad." And there it is. Penguin says, "I only got 2 hours left." All right, you're in the home stretch, dude. Hopefully between now and then you don't get hit with a bruh moment. How loud is that? If I turn the fader all the way up, bruh. Okay, it doesn't even hit yellow. I should probably just leave it at max. Bruh, 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 bruh. And it would be tempting to put that sound effect into the actual mix, but I think that'd be kind of silly. More silly than it usually is for those challenges. So I'm kind of curious to see, I probably won't be part of the mix, but if we were to take the Prince's sample, again, sped up to 131 BPM, what we can do at track effects, since I've never done this with a sample, I'm kind of curious to see what it does. So I'm going to play the sample and start messing around with some track effects and just see what it does. So let's see. We'll play it from the top. I think it's a little bit of feedback due to the tempo speed up. It's not too bad. It's a little bit weird. Alright, let's try it. I had lo-fi on earlier. That's beat scatter. Okay, beat scatter doesn't really work. That just sounds like the record is skipping. This is the lo-fi filter. Lo-fi makes it kind of muted. That's weird. Penguin says, "Be right back. If I don't come back, had fun watching." All right, man. Thanks for dropping by. Hopefully your last 2 hours are smooth and uneventful. What if we tried to put a drop in there with beat repeat? It's probably gonna sound bad. Let's see. Well, that's too fast. It's kind of weird applying something like a beat repeat to this because it's not a continuous loop. It's a progressive song. As a result, those track effects kind of do weird things because, again, it's not just looping, it's progressing. So it's looping that section of the song over and over again, and it's not progressing to the next part. It's just taking a chunk that it cuts out, and it's repeating that over and over again. This is robot voice. The notes to his melody completely drop out when you put this filter over it. That's interesting. Yeah, that sounds awful. This is ring modulator. I really want to find a way to use ring modulator like a record scratch. I don't think I can do it without flipping it on and off real quick. It's a shame. If there was like a vinyl scratch that actually functions like a DJ vinyl scratch, that'd be neat. I think the RC505 Mark II has something like that in the new hardware. Alright, let's see what else we got. Here's synth. Okay, this is actually kind of functional. If I turn the synth level down so it's not overpowering the whole track, it's actually not bad. I don't know if I would want that on a final version of the track, but it is kind of an interesting effect to have underlying the bass line and everything else that Lemon's doing here. I think I'm going to leave the synth on input effect A. I don't know if I'm going to use it for anything, but it does create an interesting effect over the whole thing. I kind of like the way it sounds. I'm just trying to hear if it's creating a clashing harmony with it. I don't think it is. But it's got to be low, otherwise it overpowers it a lot. That's at like 50. I think it needs to be at about 10%. That's combining it with filter. Alright, I had to turn that down a little bit. The filter break might be interesting to have in the middle, but for what I'm planning on doing with this, I don't think it'll work, but it does sound like an interesting way to switch up kind of the tone of the song in the middle. Let's see, maybe do it if he did it at the repeat. It creates an interesting effect. Let's see what else we got. Slicer? If we added slicer in addition to the synth, I wonder what that would do. Okay, that just caused it to cut in and out. That doesn't sound good. Delay. That was delay. Delay sounds awful. We're not going to do that. Edward says, sounds interesting, but the notes it's doing are kind of weird sounding. Yeah, I don't think the synth notes are in a complete harmony with the notes that he's doing. And I wonder if I can tweak the settings and fix that. Yeah, like some of his in-between notes on his bass line, it's creating like a really, really dissonant sounding note. In other words, it's not a harmony. Let me see. Let me see what I can adjust. This is decay. I also have it set down to about 5% instead of higher. Okay, I don't know if it's just because of the way I changed the decay. Aside from that first note towards the beginning, the rest of it doesn't sound like it's quite as dissonant. And it could be that his first note is a little bit off key, just a little bit. But now it sounds like it's actually harmonized a little bit better. I'm gonna let it run just so I can listen to it. Okay, let me save this so far. I think I don't know if that's what did it, but I think the synth effect is not quite as contrasty with the main melodies there. So I think that sounds better. It definitely sounds better. All right, let's save this. So I'm gonna leave that there. Let's see what else we can do, because I still have two other track effects that I could potentially use. I still have to think about how I want to cut up the song, but I'm kind of tempted to leave the synth overlay in there just because it switches up the track a little bit. I'm going to replay it with the synth on there, and I'm going to see what else we can add, if anything, and we'll just kind of see. It is interesting, though. Ooh, granular delay. I wonder what that sounds like. That's not bad. It kind of makes it sound more mechanical, and a little bit more lo-fi-ish. This is the granular delay applying not only to the track, but the synth filter as well. Now it's with granular delay turned up to 100. This is at 75%. This is at about 20. Or maybe 30, more like. When you turn up granular delay really high, then it starts doing a lot of weird distortion. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I want that on the actual final track, but it is kind of neat to see what it does. Let's see what else we got. Of course, this is the ghost sounds I used. That doesn't really do a whole lot. It adds a bit of resonance to the melody, but it doesn't really change the sound too much. This is roll. Oh, it's basically creating like a cycling loop of a section of the whatever the samples are. Yeah. I don't like that. Tape echo. I'm just running through the presets here. Okay, this is just creating kind of a delayed echo. I wonder why I wouldn't use that over reverb. Like straight reverb? Where is that? Yeah, I guess reverb's gonna sound a little bit more echoey compared to that other one. This is panning delay. It's creating an echoey delay, but it's also moving the sound around in the mix. So in my headphones, I can hear it like it's rotating around me. You guys that are listening with headphones, I don't know if you can tell just by the way the broadcast puts the sound, but if I wanted to do something like make it sound like the sound was coming from all over the place in the room, I could use that effect, but I don't think I'd use that for like a rap song. That would sound really weird. This is tremolo. That just creates kind of a cutting noise on the actual inputs. I guess technically, if I wanted to, it'd be kind of weird, but I could probably turn that ring modulator distortion into something like a record skip and then turn it into a one shot. But I'd have to record it on an actual loop track. I can't do it as an effect because it really won't let me do that. Alright, let's pause that for a sec. Edward says, music is only in the center for me. Okay, that's probably the way the YouTube broadcast works for the stream. It may not be outputting all of the weird effects that my loop does to the audio, since it's just broadcasting the audio in stereo by default. It better be in stereo. If I've been broadcasting in like one channel for the last 6 months, like only on the left or right, that would drive me absolutely nuts. But I'm pretty sure it's just doing stereo. But let's see. So I think I don't think there's anything I really want to do to the Prince's track other than giving it a higher BPM, and I will think about whether or not I want to keep the synth distortion on there. What I'll most likely need to do is record this and get it into my audio software and start cutting it up, because again, it's not long enough for 16 bars. I kind of want to structure it a little bit differently, and I'm working on something that's going to be a little bit different for this one. But the tempo, I think, is fine at 130. Let me see. I'm going to try to drop it down to 120, see if it sounds dramatically different. Yeah, I kind of like the pace on the 131 BPM more than 120. Okay. We'll save this. And I will have to play around with that some more, but that was a kind of an intro into sampling and messing around with individual sound sets using the loop station. Like I said, it's got a potential for a lot, and when it comes to making things like the VTuber challenge videos, I like experimenting around with the tools on the loop station. So more to come on that. It's probably going to be a little bit before I can actually post the final one. Like I said, I'm trying something different with this one. But let's see. Let's record into a different track and work on some BGM ideas. So let's see. I'm going to drop this. Bruh. That is not saved. Let's go into track 63. All right, clear that off. We'll leave the bruh button in case we need to clear another one. Edward says, by the way, that song from the Revenant's album sounded a lot better when I could hear what the stereo effects actually sounded like. Are you comparing that to the version that's in the YouTube video, Edward? Because the version that's in the YouTube video has been, I think the sound is compressed because it's edited into video format. I'm using the studio recording sound that I made, but because it's being formatted into a YouTube video, I think the sound gets compressed, and I had to sort of equalize the sound in between all the tracks, so I think they're actually louder in the compilation video I did compared to when they're up on the Bandcamp page, because I forget what the audio format is on the YouTube video, whatever MP4's native audio is, but the actual tracks on Bandcamp are recorded in or uploaded in FLAC, and so they should be uploaded at a higher bitrate and quality than what's compressed into a YouTube video. So if the versions that you're downloading off of the Bandcamp sound a lot cleaner and better, that's why. It's because they probably get smushed a bit for YouTube compression. I should probably put a disclaimer somewhere on my posts for that, because it is going to sound a little bit different. It should sound cleaner, if nothing else, because, again, it's all being formatted into a single audio format and track for the YouTube video via Vegas, but the actual files that you download off the Bandcamp site, and I believe it gives you a choice. I was testing it out after I posted the last collection, but it should give you the choice of what kind of file format you download them in. It forces me to upload them in FLAC, which I don't really use, but you should be able to set like MP3 or WAV or FLAC when you download them. But yeah, the sound quality should be better. It has to be better on the actual uploads than versus what you see in the video. So if that's what you're talking about, then that's really good to hear. I was super paranoid about whether or not people watching the video would just immediately click off because they thought that the YouTube sound quality was going to be reflected in what the uploads on the Bandcamp page sound like, but they're not the same. So that's actually really good feedback if that's the case. One thing I'm looking at doing, I haven't quite figured out the specifics yet, because I kind of need to do a little bit more research and maybe talk to some folks in the music scene. But I'd like to start putting my BGM tracks on Spotify so that people don't have to download them if they want to just listen to them or put them on in the background. I did Bandcamp first because since they're BGM tracks, if people want to use them for content, they're going to need raw files anyway. But for people who just want to listen to the music and, you know, put them on while they're working or whatever, I would like to put them on a streaming platform, since I don't know how many people actually put MP3s on their phone anymore. I know I do, but I'm a dinosaur, so I'm looking at doing that. That may be something for 2022. I may have to re-record some of the first BGM tracks because the sound quality on like Under the Ground and Super Bossa Nova could be better because they were done before I started using my loop. That I'll have to see. I could just leave them in and just have them be there as kind of an artifact of the older recording setup. But yeah, audio quality is something I struggle with a lot, and I'm super paranoid about the stuff that I make. And I'm still learning. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on mixing and recording. I try and just equalize a lot of the stuff that's coming out of my loop station when I record in my software. So feel free to keep giving me feedback as I put stuff out, because I want things to improve over time. But let's go ahead and work on some BGM ideas. I mentioned, I think it was our last jam stream. I can't remember because it's been a couple weeks. But I think I mentioned wanting to do a jazz type BGM track, since that'd be a little bit different from what we've done so far. Okay, let me turn synth off. Definitely don't want that on. But let me think about how I'd want to structure like a jazz rhythm. It could be like a jazz electronic, but I want to do something that sounds a little bit more smooth as opposed to kind of the more hip hop or aggressive like EDM type things. Even like a house beat with like kind of a jazz melody wouldn't be bad. The real problem is I don't have the ability to incorporate instruments yet because I can't hook my synthesizer up to this thing because I don't have room. But if I did, then I'd be able to pull things like, you know, synth strings or like a synth electric guitar or something into the mix. I do want to do that eventually, but I need to figure out a different streaming setup before I can do that, because I literally don't have space around my workstation to fit a 6-foot synthesizer. The synthesizer I have is massive. So let's see. I wonder. There is a sample on the loop station. I think I've played it before. That's kind of similar in style to what I wanted, but I'm not gonna cycle back and try and find it. It's buried in here somewhere. But let's think of a good. Think of a good starting rhythm, and then maybe I can structure kind of a bass line and some melody stuff around that. Hey, Wazzy's here. Hey, Wazzy, welcome to the jam stream. We are thinking about ideas for BGM tracks. And what I'm trying to think of now is a good starting place and rhythm for a jazzy track. So let's see, we could do something more mid-tempo, maybe like a rhythm that sounds kind of like a Okay, I like that a little bit better. Kind of similar to our hi-hat training beat that we were doing earlier. So let's see, maybe like a. Let's start with that, kind of mid-tempo. It's gonna get to loop cleanly, and then we'll go from there. Not double kicks, or not double snares. Take them off by a millisecond again. Too early. By the way, since Wazi popped in here, don't forget to check out her latest spooky sushi video that she put up yesterday. I think it was yesterday. This weekend. It's a good one. All right, let me try that again. It's still too late. What is my BPM set at? All right, let me see if I can get that one to loop a little more cleanly. Oh, I think I know what the problem is. Let me clear the bra button off real quick and test this. Yep, that was it. The BPM was synced to the bra button track again. Okay, we're gonna proceed forward without the bra button this time. Let me save this. And I think I'm going to double up the outward case snare with something with more reverb. So if we up the reverb a little bit, so our outward case snare, and I'm gonna overdub on top of the initial beat and make the snare sound a little bit more crisp. Hopefully I don't screw it up. And the second one I screwed up. All right. Let's try that again. Maybe the reverb's a little bit high. About there. Okay, I think that works. Now, again, on topic from our discussion about the hi-hat technicality pattern earlier, we could add some kind of funky hi-hat run, kind of like a shaker or like a brushed hat with the. Would it be good to syncopate it and go off beat? Or would it sound better to do a constant run? Or have it come in at after a rest. We don't normally do that with the beats. Let's see what that sounds like. that clashes with the hat that's part of the original. That's unfortunate. I wonder if we can do just a constant run, see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's not going to work because of the pattern of the hi-hats on the original rhythm, because it clashes. If there were no hats and then we were just doing an empty beat without hats, we could do something like slot in the hi-hat runs and it would sound okay, but it doesn't necessarily work because of the hats in there now. Okay, let's delete that. All right, let's see if we can get a bass line slotted in here. I kind of want to do like a more than one or two bar bass line. I know we keep our BGM tracks relatively simple whenever we're doing these, and it's usually like a 1 or 2 bar repeat. But I kind of want to do a bass line that's more than that, like a longer extended bass line that does some things. So I think I'm going to go guitar to bass like normal, but I want to do something that's a little more prolonged for a bass line and maybe has some movement to it. So I'm going to jump over to guitar to bass and turn it on and kind of noodle around with some different ideas for a bass line to combine with our rhythm here. So I'll turn it off if I need to say something, but you guys are going to probably hear me throwing out a whole bunch of ideas for a bass, and we'll see what kind of sticks. So I want to create something that's kind of funky, a little bit jazzy, and kind of wing it as we do. All right. Testing the bass. Oh, hey, Milk's here. Hey, Mega Milk. Welcome to the jam stream. Also, congrats on your debut the other day. Alright, so what I've slotted in here is a little bit more of a prolonged bass line than we've done on some of the other tracks. I'm trying to make sure I didn't completely whiff the notes on the end of it. I may need to redo that, but I think it's fine for now. Let me know if you guys are having trouble hearing me over the background beat. I could probably drop it down a little. Wazzy says, I keep hearing welcome to the damn stream. That may be because people keep coming in and out, Wazzy. I'm not welcoming you because you've been here. Alright, Milk says, nope, settings are good. Okay. think we'll leave the bass line there for now. Now I kind of want to get a kind of a synthy counter melody or additional melody on top of the bass line. Something that's gonna, again, we're trying to stay a little bit like funky and jazzy. And I really wish I had the ability to do more instruments via something like a synthesizer. I could do horns, but that's usually my default for like melody instruments. I'd rather do something with synths. So let me see if I can get ring modulator on here. Okay, have that enabled. Let's see.
Turning it on.
What I'm going to do is turn ring modulator on and mess with the settings while just kind of speaking normally, so you guys are going to hear garbled garbage. And if I can get something that's good in synth-like, I kind of want to run with that. I'm also going to experiment around with the synth preset, since that's also an option.
Let's see.
If I wanted to add something like a distortion in the background, or maybe like an oscillation, like a frequency oscillation, I could use the ring modulator for that, but that's not going to really serve for synth. Alright, I think the synth preset for the input effects is on A. I'm gonna have to take my dynamics off. So if my speaking suddenly drops really low, it's because my boost is gone. So let me take a look. Okay, yeah, synth is on A. So let me see if I can do something with this. Let's see. This is I think I need to adjust the level of the synth, because you can sort of hear it cutting in and out, and then you just get my voice, which is not really what I'm going for there. So let me see if I can turn it off for one. Let me see if I can adjust it so that it stays consistent and then re-record it, because I think it would sound interesting to have that paired with the bass line. All right, that sounds a little bit better. Milk says it sounds like you're saying newt newt. The synth effect, that's essentially what it's doing. It's taking any input that's spoken or sung into it and giving it that meow 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 noise. That's what creates that synth line. By changing one of the settings, I was able to extend it a little bit. So that's a little bit more in line with what I was trying to do with the synth. Now I wonder if what we can do to switch up the rhythm. Edward says, does the synth thing do long notes? And Milk says the newt setting. I see. So what I adjusted, Edward, was what was it called? Hold on. It was the frequency. That's what it was. So it keeps the thing from dropping off after an input and going from like the initial hit and then falling off completely. So it elongates it a bit. I don't know if I can make it go super long because that's at 60 something out of 100. I guess I can try. Let me turn the tracks off and try and just experiment around with it. Vale says, hi. Hey, what's up? Welcome to the stream. That one was just for Wazzy. Wazzy says, make it long, boy. Okay, so frequency seems to be the overall length of how the synth distortion is applying to the input. So if I turn it on at 87 out of I think 100, how high does this thing go? Yeah, 87 out of 100 with the synth. If I just hum into it and turn it on, it sounds like so yeah, you can make it do sustained notes by changing the frequency. And the other parts of it change. I guess I can look and see what that does, because there's frequency, resonance, and decay. So what does resonance change? I can't tell what resonance changes. It might be a little more subtle than I'm hearing just in the headphones. Let me see about decay. I think decay is how it falls off. Oh, I think decay actually creates a different note when the input goes in. That's interesting. Edward says, what does it sound like if you sing the note instead of humming it? I don't know. Let's find out. So instead of like a you're talking about it's like a well, let's find out. Turn it on. DK 60, resonance 42, frequency 87. I don't think it doesn't really sound too much different because it's applying the synth distortion on whatever input goes into the mic and when it hits. So whether I'm doing a sung note or a hummed note, I don't think it's changing the way it hits. It still sounds the same. So yeah, a hummed note would be and essentially sounds the same, but something is causing it to fluctuate. What is that? Maybe I'm just singing off key and it's fluctuating. Yeah, I think it's frequency that's going to affect how long the synth effect is applying to whatever's going in. So instead of it being just to the initial noise and then falling off, it stays for longer, which is the one I recorded just a few minutes ago. I think that's what we want. Hold on, let me back out of this and put my dynamics back on. Put that there. All right, now I can talk a little bit louder. I think if I was to change the proportion of the mix and how everything balances here, I think I'd want the bass line to be a little bit higher than the synth. Otherwise the synth overpowers it. I don't want it to be super loud. But we could take our BGM track and see. We have 2 more empty tracks in the actual mix here we could add stuff to. But I kind of want to mess around with the track level effects and see what we can do. And I'm going to turn the track level effects off for the bass line and the synth. I purely want to mess around with the rhythm to start here. So let's see. Because I copied this from the last one that we were just working on, which had the synth preset, if I try and apply the synth to just the rhythm, then you get what sounds like a series of rhythmic farts. Not necessarily what I was going for, but that is interesting. It's because it's trying to apply the synth to percussion, essentially. Boy, that sounds terrible. And turn that right off. Edward says, Nikocado type beat. Lumpy. That's how I would describe that with the synth. Ugh. Let's not do that. Okay, again, I want to see if I can switch up the rhythm. So I'm gonna try, let's try beat scatter and try the different patterns. That's 3. This is pattern 1. It almost had like a breakdown, like a slower breakdown variation on the rhythm that I really liked. Let me see if I can find where that is, if possible. That's really close. That's probably as close as it's gonna get. So what I wanted to see if it could do with the scatter will be let me see if I can just do it right here. I wanted to see if it could do like a really slow breakdown, like a slower breakdown to switch it up. I don't know if he'll get close enough though. Let's try the other pattern and see if we can get something that's close to what I'm thinking here. Whoop. Yeah, this is pattern 2. I think it's adding more lines to the rhythm, so not that one. Yeah, this is 3. This might be able to do it. This is at about 60%. Yeah, that's not going to do it. We might not be able to do it with the way the rhythm is set up. Let me see. We could try beat shift. Okay, so we're basically trying to shift the rhythm and slow it down. This is what we've done on some of our other BGM tracks as a way to sort of switch up the rhythm. Let's see if beat shift will do it. So this is beat shift at about 40%. Yeah, that's not necessarily going in the right direction. I guess technically if we wanted it to break down just that section, we might be able to do it on repeat and just capture like one specific section, have it cycle. That's the only other way I could think to do that breakdown I'm thinking of here. Let me see if I can capture it here. Okay, that's capturing a section and just sort of repeating it. Yeah, there may not be a way to do that unless I have to mess around in presets. This is using beat repeat, but using rewind, which is like on a turntable if you were using a record and you were scratching it back for a section. Which is interesting. That's probably as close as we're gonna get to a functional record scratch. So I have to remember that. Yeah, not what we're looking for here. Oh, mix. What does mix do? That's actually kind of close. It's not exactly the breakdown I was talking about, but it's close. Interesting. I'm just messing with the additional settings on the repeat, seeing what they do, since I haven't really tweaked these at all. Interesting. I really would like that slower breakdown, but I'm not seeing something here that's gonna do that readily. I think the closest is scatter on pattern 1. That's actually not bad. I think I like the way that sounds. Now let's see what other effects we can add to the overall track. We could do something like several measure repeat of the initial rhythm and everything else, and then we go into a breakdown that's going to switch up the beat like we've done on previous ones, and we use this version right here. Bass line and the synth line don't change, but the rhythm does. This is me messing around with the second track level effect and ring modulator. If I wanted to create like a melody switch, then I could technically do it just by changing the knob settings here. Could keep it at 50% and do like a complete switch to the distorted version right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the ring modulator settings and see if anything kind of tweaks that kind of go with where it's set at 50%. That can kind of work. It almost sounds like like a radar signal. And this is at 50%. I'm just changing the balance a little bit. I think our sound has morphed a little bit from something jazzy to something a little more hip-hop-ish, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it doesn't sound bad. All right, let's save our progress. Let me do sort of a rough draft, how I kind of envision the BGM track to go. This will be kind of a dry run through just to see where things sort of fall with the switch up and the bass. Or not bass, the distortion. So while I'm doing that, what do you guys want to call this one? What's a good name for it? All right, turn this off. We could start with the bass line. We don't do that super often. Bring in the beat. Have it repeat for a couple and then bring in the synth. Maybe do one more repeat and then go into the alternate part. Let's see if it works. I wonder what happens if we apply the track inputs, track effects, sorry, to the bass line. Okay, yeah, it doesn't sound good. If we apply it to the synth. I don't think that sounds good either. So we have the alternate part of the beat. And then we're going to switch back. Maybe when we come off of the switched up part, we go into just the rhythm. So if we're doing we go for like a couple bars with just the rhythm by itself. Oh, I wonder if I can turn filter on. I can. And maybe do like a filter transition to bring everything back for the last section and outro of the beat. So let's see. Turn everything on. If we go back a couple measures, do the alternate. Now we transition out to just the empty beat without the bass line and the synth. Now like a filter transition. Bring everything back. Maybe outro with just a synth. And then that's the end of the track. That could work. I do like the way it's set up because it allows me to switch between the alternate parts of the beat easily since it's just one enabling of the track effects. All right, so names, potential names for this thing. Edward says, Something to do with radar or sonar, probably. Okay, that's a good idea. We could do on the radar. It's interesting because you don't get really a hint of what that means for the song until it goes into the switch up, which I do like. I do like that idea. What do you guys think? The rest of you in the chat right now. We have on the radar for a potential name for this BGM track, which is fitting, especially when it goes into the breakdown. We turn it back on. It does sound like a radar or like a sonar ping, which wasn't my intention when I was creating this thing, but it's a kind of cool effect. If I had my way on this alternate rhythm, it'd just be to take out one of those two hats. I think it's fine because I can't really do anything about it. But if it was one instead of two, I think it would sound better. But that works for an alternate breakdown. I'm just making sure I can consistently switch between the two things. We'll give it a second to see if anybody else has suggestions for a good title of the track. So far, I like I like On the Radar just because it's not really clear what the song's about until you listen to it. All right, let me make sure I save one last time. Looking back at the stuff that we've been working on here on stream for these BGM brainstorming sessions, I think my backlog is like 3 or 4 songs between stream sounds and the actual jam stream BGM stuff. I have a lot of recording I need to do. Hopefully during the holiday break coming up, I'll have time to sit down and just do a whole batch of recording stuff. I can dump them into the collection of stuff that we've been using on stream. I will definitely post an update when I do that, because I think we have names for everything that we've done in previous sessions. I have to go back and watch the archives and see what we did. There's a bunch of them. I'm a bit behind on recording. I'm doing a kind of a final rough pass of this thing before we wrap up. Okay, go in the breakdown. I think that will do it for that one. Tentatively called On the Radar. I will make a note. So let's see. Looking at the time, I guess we could try and do one more BGM track for today. I know I kind of covered a lot of stuff between the beatbox theory and sound explanation stuff, and then the sampling experiment with Prince Lemon's beat for the challenge, and then now our BGM. But I think we got time to do one more. My schedule is considerably less busy today, so technically I don't have to jump off at a certain time. But let me do this. I'm going to run to the bathroom real quick. I've been drinking water like crazy for the last 2 hours. I'm going to put the prototype track for On the Radar on in the background, and then I'm going to turn my mic input off real quick. I'll be back in a sec, so give me 1 minute here. All right, I am back. All right, let's stop that. I'm going to save into a new track. It'll be number 64. I'm getting up there. At some point, I'm going to need to go back and do some housekeeping and clean out a bunch of the old tracks from way back in the day that are absolute garbage to make some room for being able to save more stuff on here. But for now, it's fine. We're not really at risk of running out of capacity yet. All right, so let's see. I kind of want to go back through a couple of our recent projects here on stream and see what we did, because I don't want to duplicate any of the stuff that I'm working on. Let me save this. I'm going to go back. So we did kind of a semi-funky hip-hop-ish track today. I want to say one of the last ones we did in the previous session was a drum and bass track. Problem is, I don't remember what I do each time we get back together. So before we work on a new one, I'm going to go back. See, 63 was Radar. 62 was the Prince's remix. What was 61? Oh, this might be. This was from one of our. This is one of the stream sounds. Might have been the drawing stream from a couple weeks ago. That's one that sounds like this. Pretty simple. Two-track loop. Kind of a crispy BGM snare rhythm and a 2-note bass line. Very simple but functional. Alright, what was 61? This was the drum and bass one I was thinking of, I think. Looks like I recorded this one in a little bit lower volume. And this one has a Technicality run in it too, which is, I think, the first time I've done that on a track. I think we called this one like bass tech or something because of that Technicality line. That sounds vaguely familiar. Okay. The other one was the Surprise Club one. I think this one and the previous one were from that specific jam stream. Yeah, it sounds familiar. What was the input on it, though? I think this is the one that goes straight into this repeat. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Oh, this is using scatter, not beat repeat. Okay, so that tells me the previous ones. Let's see, we've got one that has like a kind of EDM counter rhythm somewhere in the middle. We had a drum and bass one that sounds like kind of a real simple hip hop beat. Okay, that gives me a bit of a frame of reference for number 64. I kind of want to do, I've always wanted to do a dubstep type song that has a drop. The problem is I haven't quite figured out what combination of effects gives me something really heavy. I could do one just purely based on my sounds, but I kind of want to figure out how to do that effectively using the loop. So maybe we can experiment around with just a dubstep styled song and see if anything materializes as far as sounds or instruments we can use that's going to kind of give us a heavier sound. If not, that's fine. I will figure it out eventually. But let's see. Maybe a slower combination of kicks, hats, and PFs, which seems to work pretty well for like a dubstep song. So maybe something like something like that. So let's see if we can get it recorded. Okay, I think that's a good placeholder for now. What I'd like to do is have a kind of like a ascending, repeating melody that goes with the rhythm. It'll be on a separate track. This isn't the bass line, but something that's gonna pair with that. But what instrument should I use? Synth, I don't think is gonna work because synth hits on each input. I guess I can test it and see. Because I want it to be a little more prolonged. I don't want it to be short and kind of choppy. So let's see what we can do with synth. Alright, this is it. Yeah, I think synth doesn't really work because of the way it applies the distortion to inputs. What I want is like a dedicated instrument. So let me see what else I can find here. Robot might be a bad idea. No, that one adds kind of like an undertone distortion. Let's see what else. This is ring modulator. You could try experimenting with granular delay and see if anything in there is good for creating another instrument we can use to combine with this. Again, they're not looking for bass lines. I'm looking for something that's a little bit on the higher end that I can have repeating. Right. This is just regular speaking. Near 100%. Yeah, if I wanted to create some sort of weird distorted bass line, granular delay would probably work better for that. Let's keep looking. And flanger gives kind of a distortion, but doesn't really do a whole lot to if I had a synthesizer and was able to do instruments with notes, then that could pair really nicely with a lot of these distortion effects. And eventually, when I do some more research on loop station tech and other things, I'm sure I'll be able to learn what people use to do things like more elaborate synth sounds and whatnot. That's kind of the next thing I want to really focus on. But in the meantime, let's see if we can get a good bass line in here. I want to do something that's kind of heavy and distorted, so we might be able to do like a combination of guitar to bass and maybe lo-fi. I want to avoid duplicating the stuff that's in Always Behind You, since that one has kind of a distorted heavy bass line. So let's see. I'm going to start playing around with settings and see if anything clicks. Alright, so what I'm experimenting around with here is kind of a combination of guitar to bass and the lo-fi filter and tweaking settings. This was how I did the bass for Always Behind You. It was tweaked a little bit differently, but the distortion, that kind of graininess you hear on it, was done the same way. So I'm kind of tweaking things to see if I can come up with something similar but not identical to that sound. And it might be that my guitar to bass is set too high. Let me see. Okay, what caused a lot of the graininess and the distortion on the Always Behind You one was a low bit depth. I don't know what that means sound-wise, but changing that setting is what caused it to go from kind of a more resonant ringing noise to that heavy kind of growling, like scratchy distortion. And it works for regular inputs too. So if I change the bit depth and drop it lower, then it gets even more distorted, kind of like a bit crushed sound. So I'm gonna keep tweaking that for a little bit and see if I can come up with something that might sound appropriate for this particular beat. Alright, turning up I think it's a sampling ratio higher, gives it more of like a staticky noise, but not quite that really aggressive bit crush distortion. It sounds more like a transmission static distortion, which I think I like a little bit better. I'm gonna mess around with that. All right, I do like that combination of sounds for the bass. I want to think of a kind of bass line and progression of notes that's not going to sound identical to one of the other ones we've done. So I'm going to kind of sing some different note progressions and different amounts, and then when I find something that sticks, I'll actually capture and record it. So let's see what we can come up with. Okay, I think I like the progression. I made the mistake of not making the second half of the bass line consistent. I broke it up, and as a result, it sounds a little disjointed. So I'm going to try and re-record it and make it sustain from both halves, essentially. Okay, It took me a couple tries to actually get that to line up properly. It's because I cut the tail off of the first one that I recorded a little bit too soon, and then as a result, it wasn't syncing up properly. But let me listen to it now. Okay, I think that's functional. I wonder if we tried to put like a drop. Edward says the last note sounds kind of flat. Let me listen. I think it might be a quarter step too low. I think you're right. I think it needs to be up like a half or a quarter step. Let me see. Hard to tell. It might be slightly under where it needs to be, but not like a full note step. It could also be the distortion that's causing it to sort of skew and sound a little bit off. Let me try and re-record that and fix it. Of course, now I gotta remember where I put my settings. I think I found part of the problem. It's because the lo-fi distortion is not exactly matching the pitch of the guitar to bass, so it skews it a little bit when you hear it. So I'm gonna turn it down. I'm gonna turn the distortion down a little bit so that the guitar to bass is the prominent noise you hear. Because really the lo-fi should be like a single note. It's really just a distortion. It's not supposed to be moving in pitch. And because it's competing with the guitar to bass, I think that's why it sounds like it's throwing it slightly off key. So let me try that and re-record it. I also missed the like a quarter beat. I re-recorded it and it was off. Let me see if I can fix it. And I think I recorded the last two notes of the second half slightly off key, and the rhythm wasn't consistent with on the first half. It's proving to be a little bit more of a challenge. Alright, I don't think it's 100% perfect, but I was kind of going for like an arpeggio type of progression with the beat, or the bass line. I think turning the distortion down on the lo-fi helped make it so that it's not ending on kind of a weird off note. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I may have to tinker around with that some more. But what I was thinking about doing was trying to set up a drop for this one. So let's see if we can do it with beat repeat. Oh, I gotta, I gotta enable it for the bass line too. That's not bad. I wonder if there's a alternate version of the rhythm that we could switch to. We did that on the last track, so I'm not necessarily married to the idea of doing that again. But I'd be curious to see if we use something like scatter. Yeah, that's ring modulator. This is with scatter. I wonder... That was pattern 2. This is 3. Okay, yeah, we've definitely used that. I don't know if doing a scatter-based remix beat really makes sense for this one. I almost think it'd make more sense to record like an alternate version of a bass line or some sort of different rhythm that it switches to completely, rather than just using the input or track level effects to change it since we've done that on so many of them. All right, let's save this. I wonder if we could record an alternate bass line and then switch bass lines. That's a little bit tricky. We've done that on BGM tracks before, but it's a little bit of a challenge to get everything to kind of line up properly, and also keep it in key so you're not switching song keys. I will have to give that some thought, because I do want to incorporate a drop, but I want the drop to lead into something different, not just a drop and then repeating the same rhythm and bass line. We could try and invert it. I don't think I can do that with an effect. What happens if we reverse the bass line? Huh. I think the reversed version is off by like a half beat. It starts like a half beat too late, and then it sort of corrects itself, and then it sort of skews off at the end too. Otherwise, I think if it lined up perfectly, it'd be a really good alternate way to switch from the first one to the second one. And it's too bad I can't duplicate my loop tracks. Let me see if I can do this on the fly. Regular. Yeah, it's because it starts in different spots, so I can't just toggle between them easily. There's something else I can try and mess with. Hold on, let me stop this and save it before I screw anything up. Okay, yeah, can't mess with the measure. That's set based on how it records. That's good. What I did just to see what happened was I turned the recorded track into a one shot. So it'll play by itself, but only one time. So here's what I mean. so it won't cycle and loop because it's a one shot. So what I could essentially do, just if I wanted to, it's not the most efficient way to do a song construction like this. But I could do something like, basically cut it off and restart it. Doing a one shot for something like a bass line probably isn't the most efficient because I'd have to restart it every time I wanted it to continue. It would only really be functional if I want to like mess around with it for a measure, but then I'd have to go and toggle the loop back on, and yeah, it's not that effective, but it does create some interesting possibilities of just messing with the track itself. Fortunately, that's just a toggle. If I turn it off, then it's back to regular loop mode. Oh, did it? Hold on. I think it resynced itself to the BPM when I turned it back into loop mode, and I think that slightly skewed it off, which I didn't even know that could happen. I'm going to reload that whole thing just to make sure. Okay. Now it's fine. I just wanted to make sure if I reload it that everything lines up properly and it's okay. Okay. I'm kind of at a bit of a dead end for what else to add to this one. I may shelve this one for now and come back to it later after I had a chance to think about it and think about how I want to switch things up. Another thing that I thought about doing, which I didn't necessarily think I was going to apply to this particular BGM track, would be going from a dubstep beat and then either through a combination of beat repeat or the shift or scatter, one of those, having it go into a drop, and then from there switching to like a drum and bass. So it's like a drum step, I think they call that. So it starts off slower and a bit heavier with the bass, and then it goes into a drop, build up, and then after the drop, then it switches tempos and then becomes like a drum and bass rhythm. That I need to figure out if I can even do without having to re-record anything. I think I could based on something like beat repeat or maybe scatter or shift. But I'll have to see. That's going to require a bit more experimentation than I think I have time for today. But for this one will be kind of a placeholder. Maybe we'll load this one up first next time we do a jam stream and see if we can come up with some new ideas to add on to it. Because I think it sounds okay right now, but it's missing kind of another switch up or something that's going to give it a bit more variety and make it more interesting. So then we'll keep this one as a work in progress. I think the other one we did is a bit more fleshed out and a bit more interesting. But that's fine. I'm just going to put it on in the background and as we sort of wind down here. So what did we do today? We went through kind of a combination of things, a bit more content and things than I thought would be for just a jam stream. But between the discussion about beatbox theory and beatbox technique and all that stuff, I think it was a good discussion. I encourage folks who are interested in learning to always give me questions or feedback or anything, stuff you guys want to see in these jam streams. They tend to not really have much of a structure. I kind of just cover whatever I feel like covering. I do think we have something functional for the remix on the Prince's VTuber challenge. I got to do some more mixing and editing with the actual recording software I've got. But I think the sped up version gives me something to work off of. So that's good. And then we've got some ideas for BGM tracks together. Like I said, in the next week or so, I'm hoping to sit down and do one big recording session and hopefully get 3 or 4 of these tracks recorded and organized and into their respective spots. We might be getting close to hitting the number of tracks I wanted for the Stream Sounds collection. I need to look. That's gonna come out whenever I have enough tracks that I want to release. Probably next year, maybe by the end of December. I'm not in any particular rush. I kind of want to be a little selective on what I put in there. But we'll see. Whenever we do content where I need to make background tracks on the fly and things like the drawing streams and whatnot, it's usually where all those come from. And I need to go back and look and see if I've missed any. There may be 2 or 3 of the stream sounds like I forgot about. So we'll see. But I think that will do it for today's jam stream. Again, a little bit on the long side, but I think we covered a lot of interesting topics. So I'll have to look at the schedule and see when we're going to get back together to do another one of these. I need to figure out the stream schedule for next week. Next week's a holiday here in the States. We have Thanksgiving. So I may have less streams than normal. I don't know exactly what I'm doing during that time. So I need to go and figure that out. We might be spread kind of throughout the week differently. Oh, Wazzy is still here. Hey, Wazzy. Thanks again for stopping by. And same goes for the rest of you folks. It's always fun to talk with people and kick around ideas when we're doing these. But that said, we will wind up today's stream. I will catch you guys in the next one. So thanks once again and have a good evening.